You see, the curious thing about sleep is that you disappear. The body lies still, but you, whatever you are, drift into a place beyond time, thought, and identity. And yet, when you return, something has changed. Have you ever wondered where you truly go when the body sleeps? Not just dreams, not just unconsciousness, but something deeper. Tonight, let's step into that invisible realm together. Sleep isn't the end of consciousness, it's a threshold. When you fall asleep, you imagine that consciousness shuts off, as if someone has flipped a switch in the mind. But consciousness doesn't vanish, it simply withdraws from the physical world. Your senses grow quiet, your thoughts loosen their grip, and you slip beneath the surface of waking reality. It's not the end of awareness, it's a doorway. A threshold between what you call the outer world and the immense, formless inner space where your identity dissolves. Sleep is not the cessation of consciousness, it is its return to a more original, unbound state. In wakefulness, your awareness is tangled with objects, tasks, names, roles, and responsibilities. You are constantly being someone, but the moment you drift into sleep, the performance drops away. The self you defend all day long, the ego begins to unravel. This unraveling is not death, it is liberation. When the ego quiets, awareness is free to expand beyond the boundaries of personality. Sleep opens a doorway into a world where you exist without needing to be anything at all. Most people fear losing control, which is why sleep feels mysterious, even frightening. But losing control is precisely what allows consciousness to slip into deeper dimensions. In waking life, you cling tightly to a narrative. This is who I am. This is where I am. This is what I must do. But consciousness is much larger than the story you tell yourself. When you cross the threshold of sleep, that story dissolves and you touch a level of existence that doesn't depend on memory, identity, or thought. Dreams are a clue that consciousness never ceases. They show that the mind continues creating, perceiving, and experiencing, even when the physical senses are inactive. But dreams are only the surface. Beneath them lies a vast stillness, a kind of awareness without form. In deep sleep, you do not dream at all, yet you still exist. There is no image, no sound, no you, and yet somehow there is presence. This presence is consciousness in its purest form, untouched by the world, untouched by the mind. This threshold is profound because it reveals something astonishing. Consciousness does not depend on the body. When you sleep, the body lies still, unmoving, almost lifeless. Yet you continue in some subtle way. The world disappears, the senses shut down, but awareness remains hidden beneath the veil. If consciousness were merely a product of the brain, then deep sleep would be identical to unconsciousness. But when you wake, you say, I slept well. Who is this I that remembers the absence? Sleep teaches you, even if silently, that you are not the thinker but the witness. You are not the body but the awareness that experiences the body. And every night, without understanding it, you return to that witness state. Waking life convinces you that you are solid and separate. Sleep reminds you that you are fluid and boundless. Waking life narrows your perception, sleep widens it. You cross a threshold where the world disappears, and yet you remain. If you pay attention to that transition, the moment between wakefulness and sleep, you may notice something subtle, a distinct shift in consciousness, like stepping from one room into another. That moment is the doorway. And if you become aware of it, even for a second, you glimpse the truth that consciousness is continuous. Sleep is not a blackout, it is a return, a homecoming, a re-entry into the ocean of awareness from which your waking identity rises and into which it dissolves. So sleep is not the end of consciousness, it is the threshold that reveals its true nature. Waking life is the wave, sleep is the ocean. Waking life is the costume, sleep is the naked self. Each night, you step beyond the world you believe is real and touch the formless presence from which everything arises. You do not disappear when you sleep, you simply stop pretending. In sleep, you return to what you were before you became you. The ego rests, but awareness remains. When you fall asleep, the most remarkable thing happens. The ego finally stops working. All day long it clings, analyzes, compares, and defends. It keeps insisting, I am this person with this name, this history, this identity. But when sleep takes over, that entire structure collapses like a tent with its poles removed. Yet something remains. Something watches the collapse without fear. Something exists even when the I has vanished. That something is awareness, free from the noise of personality. The ego is a performance, a costume you wear to function in society. It is useful, but it is not fundamental. Sleep exposes this truth in the most gentle way. You do not try to drop the ego, it simply grows quiet on its own. The roles you play fade. The tensions you carry dissolve. The person you think you are loosens its grip. And when this happens, you slip into a more spacious, natural state of consciousness, one that doesn't need a name or a narrative to exist. Think of the ego as a narrator who believes it must constantly comment on every moment of your life. In sleep, that narrator disappears, but the story of existence does not. Experience continues. Sensation continues. Even dreaming continues. But the narrator is absent. This shows that awareness is not something the ego produces, it is something the ego sits on top of, like a wave riding the ocean. When the wave subsides, the ocean remains. Deep sleep is perhaps the clearest evidence of this. In that state, you do not dream, you do not think, you do not imagine, and yet you exist. You wake up and say, I slept. But who is this I that remembers the absence? The ego was not there. The mind was not active. And yet awareness was present enough to register the experience of peace. This is the paradox. The ego sleeps, but awareness never does. It simply rests in its own stillness. This is why sleep feels so restorative. Not because the body alone relaxes, but because the ego, the constant tension of being someone, finally lets go. When the ego rests, awareness returns to its natural form. Open, boundaryless, unburdened. This is why you wake from deep sleep feeling clearer, lighter, more whole. For a few hours, you were free from the character you play. You tasted the simplicity of just being. So understand this. The ego is not your awareness. It is only a temporary structure within it. Sleep reveals this truth every night. When the ego quiets, awareness remains like the sky behind the clouds. You are that sky, vast, unbroken, and always present, even when the weather of the mind shifts. To know this is to soften your grip on identity and to discover the profound freedom that lies in simply being. Dreams are the echoes of a deeper dimension. Dreams are not random noise in the mind. They are the ripples left behind when consciousness slips beneath the surface of waking reality. When the senses grow quiet and the ego softens its grip, awareness begins to perceive in a different way. What you call a dream is simply your consciousness expressing itself without the limitations of the physical world. It paints with emotion, memory, symbol, and intuition. These experiences are not meaningless. They are echoes from a deeper layer of existence, where the boundaries of time and identity no longer apply. In waking life, you experience the world as solid, linear, and predictable, because your mind filters it into a coherent story. But when you dream, that filter dissolves. You become fluid, shifting from one scene to another without resistance. This fluidity is closer to the true nature of consciousness than the rigid structure of waking thought. Dreams are like brief windows into a dimension where the mind is free to play, explore, and remember what it is beyond its earthly responsibilities. They reveal that reality is far more flexible than you assume. Think of dreams as messages written in the language of the soul, a language not bound by logic, but by symbolism. A door in a dream may not be a door at all, but a possibility you haven't opened. Falling may not mean danger, but surrender. Flying may not be fantasy, but a reminder of your inner weightlessness when you let go of control. This symbolic world is not separate from you. It is you, speaking to yourself from a level of awareness that waking thought cannot easily reach. The reason dreams feel so real while you're inside them is because they are real, just not in the physical sense. They are real as experiences, as sensations, as emotional truths. A dream can make you weep, laugh, tremble, or awaken with a clarity you could not find in everyday life. This shows that you are not limited to the physical world. Consciousness continues to create, perceive, and explore even when the body sleeps. In this way, dreams are proof that awareness does not depend on matter to exist. What is especially fascinating is how dreams blur the line between the inner and outer worlds. In waking life, you assume the world is out there and you are in here. But in dreams, there is no such division. The world you experience is made entirely of your own awareness, yet it feels external, alive, and interactive. This reveals a profound truth. Even in waking life, the line between inner and outer is not as clear as you think. Perception always begins within you. Dreams simply make that fact impossible to ignore. And so, dreams are not illusions to be dismissed, they are invitations to explore yourself more deeply. They are whispers from a dimension where the ego cannot intrude. where awareness moves freely, unobstructed by logic. They remind you that you are far more than a body, far more than a waking character navigating a physical world. Dreams are gentle echoes of your infinite nature, calling you to remember the vastness of consciousness that lies beneath the surface of ordinary life. Time dissolves, and you return to the source. When you fall into deep sleep, the most extraordinary thing happens. Time simply disappears. You do not experience an hour, or 5, or 8. You vanish from the clock altogether. And yet, when you wake, you say, "I slept." This simple realization tells you something profound. Your awareness persists even in the absence of time. In deep sleep, you drift into a state where the past and future collapse, where the mind no longer divides experience into moment. You return to a dimension where time is not something you move through, but something you temporarily imagine while awake. Time, you see, is a creation of thought, a way of breaking reality into manageable pieces. But consciousness itself is timeless. In deep sleep, you are not counting minutes, not remembering yesterday, not anticipating tomorrow. You cease to be a character in a story. Instead, you sink into the background of existence, the silent field from which all experience arises. This state is not unconsciousness, it is pure being, free from the tension of becoming. You are not moving forward or backward, you simply are. This is why deep sleep feels so peaceful. It is the closest you come, each night, to touching the source, the undivided awareness beneath all your thoughts and roles. In waking life, you are constantly constructing yourself, your plans, your identity, your memories. But in deep sleep, the construction dissolves. You return to the foundation. There is no you needing to do anything. No striving, no regret, no desire. The ocean of consciousness reclaims the wave, and the wave does not resist. If you look closely at your experience, you'll notice something remarkable. Deep sleep is the only time you taste the absence of the ego without fear. You do not panic when you disappear. You welcome it. You surrender completely because something in you remembers that this state is your origin. You came from this stillness, and you return to it every night. Death frightens you only because you imagine deep sleep with no waking. But the peace you feel in sleep is proof that dissolving into the source is not terrifying, it is the most natural thing in the world. Time dissolving in sleep reveals that awareness exists beyond the boundaries of your physical life. When you return from deep sleep, you pick up the thread of time again, but the thread isn't as real as you believe. It is a narrative you resume, like reopening a book after setting it down. Sleep shows you that the story is not continuous. Consciousness simply steps out of the narrative, then steps back in. You call this rest, but it is actually a temporary return to the formless state where all stories begin. And this is the quiet secret sleep teaches you. You are not bound by time. You dip in and out of it every day. When you close your eyes, you return to the source, the ground of being, the timeless presence that existed before you were born and will exist long after the body is gone. So when you sleep, don't think of it as drifting away from life. Think of it as returning home, slipping beneath the illusion of time and remembering for a brief and blessed moment what you truly are. What you call you doesn't need the body to exist. When you fall asleep, the body lies there like an empty garment, breathing, resting, repairing, but the you that experiences life slips away from it. This alone reveals something profound. Your identity is not confined to flesh and bone. The body is the instrument, not the musician. Every night, without ceremony, you detach from your physical form and continue existing in a realm where sight is not seen with eyes, movement is not made with limbs, and experience arises without a body to process it. This simple act of sleep quietly proves that what you call you is far more spacious than the body it inhabits. In dreams, you run without legs, see without eyes, speak without a mouth, and feel without a beating heart. The body does nothing, yet you experience everything. This suggests that awareness can express itself through the body, but it does not depend on the body to be aware. You can be in an ocean without getting wet, and in a dream without needing a brain. The body is your anchor to the physical world, but consciousness is not trapped by it. Dreams remind you that the boundaries you believe are absolute are merely agreements made between the mind and the senses. Deep sleep reveals this even more clearly. In that state, the body continues its biological tasks, but you vanish from its mechanics entirely. And yet you still exist enough to say afterward, "I slept well." Where were you during those hours when the body was most alive and you were least involved? You were present, but not as a person, not as a thinker, not as a body. You existed as awareness without form, without identity, without the burdens of the physical world. This state shows you your essence more clearly than waking life ever does. The truth is that the body does not create consciousness. Consciousness creates the experience of having a body. The body is a temporary vehicle, a sensory lens through which the infinite observes the finite. But when the lens is set down as it is in sleep, or in moments of deep meditation, the observer does not disappear. It simply expands beyond the limitations of matter. You return to the spaciousness from which all perception arises. This is why people who have near-death experiences often describe a feeling of being more alive outside the body than within it. The interesting thing is that most people live their entire lives identifying themselves with this temporary vehicle, my body, my face, my age, my story. But every night, you abandon that identity effortlessly. You slip out of the body's boundaries as naturally as a bird leaves a branch. The attachment returns only when you wake and resume the role you've been rehearsing since childhood. The body is a marvelous tool for navigating the world, but it is not the container of your consciousness. If anything, it is the costume your awareness wears to perform the play of life. So understand this: what you call you is not enclosed within skin. You are not a creature trapped in a shell. You are the awareness that experiences the shell. Sleep is your nightly reminder that you exist without needing eyes to see or a brain to think. You are the witness behind both waking and dreaming, the presence that remains when the body rests. And when the body is gone, the awareness that animates it will not vanish. It will simply return fully to the limitless dimension it touches every night without you noticing. Why deep sleep feels like peaceful death. Deep sleep is perhaps the closest you come to death without actually leaving the body. In that state, the you, who thinks, worries, plans, and remembers, vanishes completely. There is no story, no identity, no past or future. And yet, paradoxically, you do not experience fear. You surrender effortlessly into this nothingness, and when you return, you say, I slept peacefully. This shows something profound. The part of you that resists death while awake is the ego, not your true nature. The deeper self has no fear of dissolving, because it recognizes dissolution as home. What makes deep sleep so extraordinary is that you do not witness it, and yet you benefit from it. You do not observe yourself resting. You simply fall into a silent expanse where all tension disappears. This absence of experience is not emptiness. It is fullness without form. The peace you feel upon waking is the aftertaste of having touched a dimension untouched by thought. Death in many ways resembles this state. The dropping away of the mind's noise, the release of the body's burden, the return to something vast and formless. Consider how willingly you enter deep sleep each night. If deep sleep truly felt like annihilation, you would resist it with every fiber of your being, but instead you welcome it. You lie down, close your eyes, and allow yourself to vanish. The reason you do not fear this vanishing is because, deep within, you intuit that your existence does not depend on staying conscious as a person. You trust the fall. You trust the disappearance. This trust reflects an ancient wisdom, that the essence of who you are cannot be harmed by the absence of identity. In deep sleep, even the idea of I disappears. You are not dreaming, you are not observing, you are not imagining. And yet, something remains the silent background of awareness that exists with or without the ego. This silent awareness is not disturbed by the loss of personal identity. In fact, it is liberated by it. That liberation is why deep sleep feels peaceful rather than terrifying. It is a return to your original state, the state before you became a character in the world of form. The peace of deep sleep reveals that the fear of death belongs only to the thinking mind. The mind cannot imagine a world without itself, and so it clings to continuity. But deep sleep shows you a different truth. Consciousness does not need personality to exist, nor does it need constant experience to be real. When you touch this formless state each night, you unknowingly rehearse the moment of death and discover that it is not the horror the waking mind imagines. It is simply another release. So when deep sleep washes over you, understand that you are not disappearing, you are returning. Returning to a state without thought, without tension, without the ego's endless struggle to maintain itself. This is why deep sleep feels like peaceful death. It is the same dissolution, but without the finality. It is the universe reminding you, gently and repeatedly, that what you truly are cannot be destroyed. You are the awareness beneath the story, and in deep sleep you briefly remember that truth. Waking up is just another form of forgetting. When you wake up in the morning, you imagine you are returning to reality, but what you are actually doing is forgetting where you just were. Sleep takes you to a dimension where the ego dissolves, where time disappears, where you exist without needing to be a person at all. But the moment you open your eyes, the mind rushes back in, eager to rebuild the story. Your name, your responsibilities, your memories, your worries. Waking up is less a return to truth and more a return to the fiction you've agreed to play out. The interesting thing is that every morning you reassemble yourself automatically. You pick up your personality like clothing laid out the night before. You remember your preferences, your frustrations, your unfinished business. But notice, none of these things were present in deep sleep. They reappear because the mind retrieves them, not because they are permanent features of consciousness. In this sense, waking up is an act of forgetting the vastness of awareness you briefly touched when the mind was silent. You see, waking life feels familiar only because you've spent years practicing it. You've memorized the role of you so thoroughly that it seems natural. But sleep shows that this role is optional. In deep sleep, you forget the character entirely, and yet you still exist. When you wake, you forget the formless state and return to the form. It's almost comical. Each night you dissolve into infinity, and each morning you pretend you never left. Waking up is the mind's way of restoring the illusion of continuity. Dreams offer a glimpse of this transition. Even in dreams, you take on identities that shift and dissolve without resistance. But upon waking, the mind dismisses the dream world as unreal and clings to the waking world as real simply because it is consistent. But reality is not defined by consistency, it is defined by awareness. And awareness persists through waking, dreaming, and deep sleep alike. What changes is the narrative. Waking up is just adopting a new narrative and forgetting that you were ever free from it. This is why some people experience moments of confusion upon waking a few seconds where they don't know who they are or where they are. In those brief moments, you are closer to truth than you are the rest of the day. The mind hasn't fully loaded the self yet. You are awareness without identity, present without a past. But then the mind snaps back, "Ah, yes, I remember who I'm supposed to be." And just like that, the forgetting is complete. You are back inside the costume. So understand this, waking up is not the opposite of sleep, it is simply another shift in consciousness. Deep sleep reveals your true nature, waking life obscures it. Each morning, you forget that you are the boundless awareness behind every experience. You shrink back into the self you perform for the world. But once you've seen the truth, once you've sensed the silence beneath the story, you begin to wake differently. You wake knowing the self is a role, not a prison. And that subtle knowing is the beginning of real freedom. Perhaps you've never truly left because there's nowhere to go. Sleep merely pulls the curtain back from the illusion of separateness. And when the mind grows still and the body falls silent, you return to what you always were, a wave in the great ocean of consciousness. So next time you fall asleep, don't resist. You're not vanishing, you're returning,